Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak has been out for about a month now. I feel it's safe to say most of the player base has had time to dig through the core game path and splash about in the new end game, and also I think it's safe to say the response has been strongly positive, certainly much more consistently positive than the end game of Base Rise was received. And Sunbreak's release has had quite an appreciable effect on the player base on PC too. Unlike Base Rise, it released simultaneously with the Nintendo Switch update, which made it a lot more inviting for many more hunters to choose to play on PC. Now in the past, I've made videos celebrating the very first mods to hit the PC version of Base Rise. Then, after the modding community had some time to fiddle, I took a look at what I considered some of the essential mods for Rise, and then took a look at some just the fun ones, while I bitched a bit about the unstoppable creepy horniness far too many modders seem to have. Seriously, what's up with that? So now, today, I want to look at the first batch of Sunbreak-ready mods that I consider essential, or just kind of really desirable, mods that make the game work even better, work smarter, and a couple of mods that just make me smile even more often than I already do while playing this amazingly fantastic fun-time game. Hello again, I am Blanty, and here are my top picks for Month 1 Sunbreak mods, starting with solving the biggest problem on PC that Rise/Sunbreak ever has. And I've spoken about this before, in a video where I spoke of the reasons my main platform for this game is the Nintendo Switch, despite the unceasing glory of playing it in 4K and triple-digit frame rates. And that is the region-locked matchmaking, splintering the playbase into small pools of players that it's even possible for you to matchmake with. And bizarrely, this is tied to your Steam download region setting, which is why I have mine usually set to Tokyo, not Sydney, which is where I actually live. Otherwise, I just time out on more than 80% of the hunts I tried to join. But there's a mod called Better Matchmaking, originally designed just to automatically reset the matchmaking search timeout thing, so you could just sit there indefinitely until a match was finally found for you, which is nice, it's okay, it's better than having to reset the search every single time it times out on you, but it still could mean you're just sitting there not playing this super fun game, just waiting to play the game for quite some time. But about a week ago, it was updated with a new feature, a feature that disables region locking for matchmaking. Why the developers themselves couldn't or wouldn't do this, I don't know, because guess what? It works perfectly well. It has a few limits, but it is way better than the default behavior. You can set it up in a few ways, either normal behavior of just local matchmaking, or you can have it extended, so also the neighboring regions are included in your matchmaking searches, or expand that to, as they say, about half the planet away, and finally, utterly unlimited to the entire planet, which is not actually recommended, as at that stage the chances of having very significant issues with lag and desync becomes much more problematic. The default setting for the mod is to burst you out to the neighboring regions, and thusly greatly expanding your matchmaking opportunities while also keeping the risk of significant lag down. That's the one I've been using, and it works great. Now, of course, it's really hard to specifically quantify how and when and how often it's working. There's no real easy way for me to actually see where the other people I'm matchmaking with are from, except for my broad guess based on usernames, which is inexact, and being Australian, if I matchmake with folk who have Japanese or Korean or Chinese characters in their names, odds are reasonable they are in those regions. I'm used to playing a lot with Japanese players. My time zone is Sydney, which is only a couple of hours away from Tokyo, and the game series has always been strongly popular in Japan, which means the player base in Japan is very strong and very large. So over on the Switch, which has no region lock as Steam does, I matchmake with Japanese players extremely regularly. But with this mod installed, I can keep my download server set to Sydney, so Steam pulls all my other downloads and installs from local servers, which makes them faster, obviously, and I can still matchmake with my Japanese and beyond hunters. And it really does seem to work really quite nicely. Again, it's really hard to quantify how often and how many non-Aussie players I'm matchmaking with when I've got my download region set to Sydney, but I can tell you this much. I have extremely significantly more reliable and faster matchmaking success after I installed this mod. I spend way less time watching the matchmaking screen tick away. And for me, that's enough to tell me the mod's working great. More hunting, more full team hunts, more fun, less wasted time. I consider this mod, above all others, absolutely essential. One limitation to note, it only works when you join someone else's hunt. If you are the host of the hunt, if you start the hunt and open it up to matchmaking, the usual region locks will apply, unless of course the people matchmaking with you also have the mod applied, because this is all client side. The mod can't magically change other people's games to look outside of the default region lock and the default behavior of the matchmaking in the game. That is the only weakness of this mod, basically. Now, I do not consider the Type 002 aircraft carrier mod essential, but I did want to show it in this video because it's so anachronistically, hilariously stupid and wrong, and it even changes all the other ships out in the water. You see there? Not just the ship that's docked, but all the other ships as well. But beyond being weird and hilarious, more than anything else I wanted to show it off because it is an interesting example of modders being able to change things in the hub town, which I don't think I've seen other examples of so far, at least not outside of the creepy, horny incel stuff of making all the NPCs naked and the like. This is the first structural change I've seen to the town, which is, in itself, interesting. I'm imagining other mods that change the canteen into, I don't know, a McDonald's drive-through or the market stall into a little New York-style bodega or something, you know. I'm not sure if this is going to open up very many practical opportunities, but there's some fun opportunities out there, certainly. Next up, a much more useful mod, Sunbreak Monster Weakness Icons. I've talked about a similar mod in the past, one I have still been using up until this point, in fact, and while that one simply modified the monster icons to remind you of their main elemental weakness, this one expands on that idea. It will show you the elemental weaknesses of the monster that it is most vulnerable to. Additionally, it can show you the ailments that the monster is most vulnerable to, with at least 2-star effectiveness or higher. And thirdly, it can show you the elemental blights and ailments that the monster can cause you, so you can go into it a little more prepared. Now that last one is much easier to remember, you know, about what monsters cause what ailments, but the first two, I'm always forgetting a bunch of monsters and what they're weakest to and stuff like that, so a quick and easy visual reminder without having to dig into my hunter's notes and find the critter, it's real nice. And the mod comes in several permutations, so you can have just the weaknesses if you want, through to all three on the icon sets. It's very, very handy. Next up, another extremely handy mod. It's a mod that will show you which afflicted items drop in which hunts against which monsters, which, much like the last mod, is one that is extremely helpful when it comes to farming parts and being effective at that. This information is usually buried several pages deep in the hunting notes menu, but it's now front and center right on the quest selection screen. So if you're trying to craft a weapon that needs an afflicted claw, for example, you don't have to dig through your notes to find out which monsters drop that. You can just see it on the quest screen. And seeing as these kind of parts are in high demand for absolute endgame crafting, this is extremely useful information to have at a glance at your fingertips. It's another mod I would consider essential, and one more I consider a mistake on the developer's behalf of not making this process easier by default, because for many of these drops, it's hardly intuitive to guess or even remember who drops pelts or claws or whatever, because all the monsters have pelts and claws pretty much, don't they? Only some of them have shells, but not all the ones that have shells actually dropped afflicted shells, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. And even then, it's hardly intuitive to find what you need. It's bad design that's fixed by modders, and I love it. I'll have this one permanently installed, thank you very much. And lastly, three less essential but very fun, in my opinion, visual-only mods. First, the return of the Wriggler Head. Probably my favorite goofy armor piece from Monster Hunter World is returning with this one. It replaces the Jagras headpiece in Rise, and it comes complete with all the correct wibble-wobble physics animations, and I just love it. I don't know, I couldn't tell you exactly why I love the Wriggler Head so much. I just feel it in my heart and in my bones and in my soul. It brings joy to me, and I love having it there. And then there's the baby Cohoot hat. This can replace either the monk snail hat, which no thank you, I'll be keeping my fuzzy little snail friend hat, thank you very much. But it can also replace the Guild Cross circlet, which I do use very often in my mixed sets because I really like it, because I like to see my hunter's face and hair, which most headpieces, cover up. But now I can have the game's cutest critter perched upon my head while I go about my hunter's day. Too cute for words. But if you'd rather not replace either of those armor pieces I mentioned, there are instructions provided to manually edit the mod file to replace whatever headpiece you like. And finally, as much as I love the palimutes and good doggos are always cute, I have to admit, And again, I'm not even sure why. It's a bit like the Wriggler Head. But this Jagras palimute layered mod, it just makes me smile. It replaces the Amy set, which frankly I never used anyway because, well, I have no emotional connection to the game that is from in the first place. I hear it's quite good, but I never did get around to it. Maybe if they do a remake someday, I'll give it another go, but you know, whatever. But out of the few other weird reskins for the palimutes, I think taming a Jagras to gallop about on feels the most natural fit for the game. It's not anachronistic. It certainly feels more natural than Thomas the Tank Engine, one of the very first mods I ever highlighted for this game, or, you know, a tiny Zenoga, which is one of the other popular choices that people have been running. And as a bonus, the Jagras skin fits really well over the animation skin for the doggos, so, you know, when you go to pet it or feed it or whatever, it actually works reasonably well. The only thing I would change is I do wish you could do away with the sparkly, flamey armor piece on its back when you're not riding it, because that doesn't quite fit, but, you know, when you're riding it, that disappears at least. It looks really cool, don't you think? I think that's cool. Anyway, just before I sign off, a mod I won't be using, but one I wanted to mention because I know for a fact at least a fraction of the player base will be very, very interested in. It's a mod that removes the monster icons from the UI map when you're on a hunt. So those of you who want to manually scramble around the map trying to find the monster, much like you would of in World, for example, except without the scout flies this time, in the belief that this somehow is a more immersive hunt experience for you, well, there you go. You can have it now. This is a mod that, well, I guess in the terms of the game, it blinds your Cohoot so he can't tell you where the monsters are lurking anymore. You heartless bastards. How dare you blind a poor, innocent Cohoot who's just trying to be helpful for you and point out where the monsters are so you can get to the fun part of the game instead of roaming around the map blindly hoping to find the monster. But, you know, to each their own. If you wanted that, if you want that more immersion of having to actually look for the monster on a hunt, if that's part of the essential hunt experience for you, you can have that now. And you won't even have the scout flies to help you out either. So thanks for watching. Thanks as usual to the patrons whose above and beyond support I appreciate very, very much. I am Blunty, and enjoy your hunting. I'll catch you next time.